Hi, I'm Reed, this is Crowland Publishing, and we're a narrative game channel, and today we're going to talk about the Wheel of Time series of novels, and how to use it as an inspiration for your fantasy RPG, mainly D&D obviously. So the Wheel of Time, if for somehow you don't know, was a hugely popular doorstopper fantasy, so there are only 10 books that big, by a chap called Robert Jordan, who got his start, I believe, writing Conan novels. Now, I will be honest, I've read a lot of fantasy novels in my life. Wheel of Time is not really my favourite. It's fine if you like it, it's not a problem, it's just not for me. There's this whole sort of slew of Mormon written fantasy novels that are quite odd, and they tend to have a lot of tropes that I find a little bit alienating, especially in relationship to gender and sexuality and all the rest of it. Maybe you'll be fine, just not really for me. But I kind of dig the setting of the Wheel of Time, and I think that you will too, and I think that it's actually very, very useful to draw from for D&D games. So if you like it, why don't you also like this video? Press the button, go on. And if you've run a Wheel of Time based campaign, why don't you tell me in the videos? Anyway, let's go. So the Wheel of Time is a pretty standard old school fantasy novel. There's a young man, he discovers that he is the chosen one, the reborn hero who's chosen by the gods, which is God in this particular case, to strike down the Lord of Darkness. That's fine, it doesn't have to be original to be good. But Wheel of Time has some nice twists in the storytelling, some nice play on the tropes, and for my mind has some really, really cool monsters and some interesting locations. And it also has a surprisingly non-traditional aesthetic of clothes, of haircuts, of buildings, of swords, things like that, the material culture of the world. So if you're like me, you just listen to these videos while you are doing the dishes or whatever, glance up now and again to have a look at all the fan art and stuff that I've put together. But first of all, let's get into a real quick overview of the actual world itself. So in the beginning, the creator, God, he invents the world and also Satan. And Shaitan, as he's called here, is referred to as the Dark One throughout the book. So, it's incredible world building. And the universe, the world, is set up in what philosophers call an eternal recurrence. All of this has happened before, all of this will happen again. Now, underpinning this entire book is that the creator has invented good magic, which is divided into two sexed varieties. Saidar, which only women can use, and Saidin, which only men can use. Now, women must surrender themselves to this enormous power and be passive and allow it to work its will through them, where men must manfully beat it into submission and... yeah, alright, moving on. Straight off the bat. Problems. Anyway, so that power is divided up into earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. And the Dark One also has dark versions of these powers. Alright. But the Aes Sedai, the magicians of the day, create this fantastic golden age. And eventually, they become so powerful, so mighty, so far-reaching, that they even become aware that somewhere out there is a prison that the Dark One is trapped in. And this Dark One, they don't recognize as evil, they recognize as just a source of power. And begin a project to bore into his prison to see what's inside. Now, this lost civilization is important. Loads and loads of fantasy novels have lost civilizations that are an important part of their backstory and world building. Valyria for Game of Thrones, the First Empire for the Malazan books, loads of stuff. But the Wheel of Time books, their fantasy world has essentially become a magical high-tech utopia. Or it's even hinted at that it's actually the future of our world. The world of magic is treated very scientifically in the flashbacks that we get and the expanded universe material that we get. It's not a cabal of foolish wizards who will break into the Dark One's prison in search of eternal glorious power. It's a research team that the Aes Sedai, these magicians, are scientifically kind of probing the walls of the prison going, we wonder what is in there. And eventually, most of this research team, they are turned into the Forsaken, the Dark Lords of the series. But one of the really interesting things about the Forsaken is this. It's broadly hinted that a lot of these bad guys were just regular people. They dressed and acted like modern people. There's loads of hints of them watching TV and been flying cars and wearing suits and ties, or at least something very close to that. And I think that important lessons to DMs here is that you can take some risks with your backstory in ways that you can't necessarily with your campaign. Your backstory is just a source of ideas and just a source of threats and just a source of inspiration for your PCs and for adventures for the game. So you can take risks with that you might not necessarily want to do with the stories that you present at the actual table. And you don't have to be bound to cliches. You don't have to go, lo, once there was the Dragon Empire of the East. Ah, behold the days of the Devil Empire. You can really take risks with this part of your world building, and maybe it will have an interesting through line onto your current adventures. And something that I've really taken from The Forsaken and this golden age period of Robert Jordan's is that this is a fantastic way to introduce bad guys that are not necessarily evil and just have radically different morals to the people of the current age, because you can't always have, Loth will rise. The baddies here, they were scientists. And a lot of them were corrupted by the Dark One, not to be, serve me and you shall feast upon souls. It was more like, serve me and you won't have to go and do ethics courses anymore. The bad guys come over to the Dark One because they are philosophically convinced. They are told, imagine what you could learn from me, an eternal cosmic being, if I lifted all restraints from you. The head baddie of the series, actually, Samael, he is a logical philosopher who simply feels that he's proven mathematically that the bad guys will win. And that's why he goes over to serve Shaitan. And I think that's a great background for baddies. They're sophisticated, and they're intelligent, and they have a variety of motivations, and they also have relationships with one another. At first, it's really, really strong. Later on, they develop into a bunch of scheming cacklers, but the idea of setting up your bad guys that your characters can and should and will relate to, not necessarily always in antagonistic relationships, not always in a kick in the door and stab the Dark Lord in the face 1,000 times. They're people, they're intelligent, and they want things. Everyone's done greedy dragons, everyone's done liches who want to necromance the world, but people who do evil because they feel it's for the greater good, or maybe it's just simply the logical thing to do, that's a fantastic hook for a DM to hang a villain on. Nearly everyone's done greedy dragons, or liches who want to necromance the world, but people who do evil because they feel it's for the greater good, or simply because it's logically compelling, that's a really good hook to steal for your bad guys. Anyway, back to the backstory. So the Forsaken, now they've become fully evil and they declare a huge war against all the good people who rediscover God, and essentially you have a evil religion versus good religion backstory. And this is where all the monsters of the world come from. They are lab-grown biological war machines, and I think that's a really, really strong place to actually start. Explaining why are there so many weird monsters in a D&D world? Why are there owlbears? Why are there flumps? Why are there all these crazy creatures? And it's simply that someone made them to be in a war. There's some pretty cool ones, actually, in Robert Jordan books. The big ones are the Trollocs, who are half-animal, half-human hybrid kind of monsters. They obviously use ogre stats and orc stats and goblin stats and gnoll stats and all the rest of it. The Myrddraal, who are these cool, sneaky, eyeless shadow wielders. There are some monster dogs. There are some Batmans. I actually really like the Myrddraal, the Fades. They're my favourites. Go check out some of the wikis if you haven't read it, because you'll definitely want to steal some of these for your personal campaign. So there's been a big hero of this ancient war, and he is nicknamed the Dragon, and he defeats all the bad guys. He eventually puts the devil back into hell. But there's a bit of a problem in that the devil's final masterstroke to revenge himself on these good guys is that he curses the magical source of power, so that all male magicians who use magic will eventually go insane, so that it continues on to the actual novels themselves. So the poor old dragon, despite being a big hero, he goes crazy and he blows up the world. And this is the moment of the big cataclysm, again very, very common in fantasy novels. So some people then go and live on the ocean, and they become the Shan-Shan. Some weird dog elves pop up called Ogiers. There's some actually really quite cool extra-dimensional beasties called the Finn appear. Empires rise and fall. Fremen ripoffs called the Aiel appear. Here they're sort of the resident badass warrior culture. A King Arthur type appears. And all the while, the women I set up, because the women aren't cursed, they're hugely behind the scenes political. No one really trusts them, but they're the only people who can really use magic. And so they're very, very important, and everything kind of rises and falls according to their Bene Gesserit style manipulations. And the world is divided into all these little tiny nations, and they're all at war with each other. They're all trade with one another. It's like a huge Italian Renaissance. The only thing that they all have in common is that they all kill men who can do magic. They all give them over to the Aes Sedai, who put them in prison or steal their powers. And the books start where the seals that hold the Dark One's prison shut are beginning to break. And then the dragon is reborn because of eternal recurrence. So this is a good backstory because the ancient empire is always a useful trope for fantasy novelists, and it's why they keep using it, because the ancient empire now fallen is a source of ancient peril, it's a source of fantastic treasure, it's a source of exotic locations for adventures to take place in. The variety of countries and cultures, the trade and share language is great for PCs looking for a backstory. I come from the northern wilds where I am a barbarian and a ranger. I am a sophisticated trader and that is why I am a bard. And there's enough supernatural elements that means no one freaks out if they see a spell cast, but it can keep it in the low fantasy territory that it so thrives in a first level D&D campaign. Now, spoilers now for a 30-year-old book that I'm sure you would have read by now, but I want to talk about this as if it was a campaign. The beginning of the novel is this. It's just a local village. Everyone's just a first level character, but the main character, Rand, is tall, he's handsome, and his father refuses to reveal to him why he's an orphan and why he has no mum, and why he will never tell him anything about the circumstances of his birth. And he's got two mates. He's got Matt, who's the local troublemaker, and Perrin, who is the local I'm big and tough but kind of slow and nice, and the bratty younger sister who the main character kind of fancies. So they're a bunch of first level characters just running around having fun. And then one day a 10th level wizard comes and says, "Hey guys, I'm an setter, I am a lady magician, come with me and do a cool quest with us." And they do, and then they all start out with their campaign. And of course eventually it becomes revealed that Rand is the reborn dragon, and that he becomes the world's greatest super wizard. Everyone falls in love with him, he unites all the kingdom, and eventually he takes down the Dark One. But he is still actually sent insane by the curse on men's magic. So that's, keeps him from being a 100% Mary Sue kind of all-around good guy character. And the rest of those characters we're introduced to have cool story arcs as well. Egwene, that first girlfriend, the bratty sister, she becomes a powerful lady wizard. Another one gets cool wolf powers. One of them becomes the greatest magician of the era, actually. And if nothing else, you should read Wheel of Time because it actually does give you a pretty interesting example of what a level 1 to level 20 campaign looks like in some ways. And even the baddies level up, actually. It's quite interesting. And I think that the lesson there for DMs is that games must change focus as the level increases. If you think that your campaign has legs, if you are really going to try for something that is going to last for a year or 2 years, plan it out. Level 1 to 5, cool one-off adventures. Level 6 to 10, you want to run a kingdom or you want to have some sort of influence over the world itself. Level 10 to 15, you're going to solve international supernatural problems and diplomacy on an international level. But over level 15, the big scary monsters and gods and the really, really high-level NPCs are going to be what you're dealing with. So plan ahead. And the other thing the DM should learn is to let the PCs grow and give them opportunities to grow. Actually, I just want to talk for a second about my favourite character of this book's Matt. Matt's kind of a grifter character. He's sort of a Han Solo. He doesn't want to be involved with controlling nations. He doesn't want to be involved in magic. But a few things happen. First, he learns that he is a reborn, reincarnated general. And he's got all these cool general ideas in his head, and he's seen it all before, and he's kind of like becomes a grizzled veteran. That's a cool idea for a PC. You're a reborn character from the game lore. You're immediately tied back into your backstory. Then he does a deal with his weird fey entities who give him luck powers. He plays cards, he wins, he falls over, he lands on a mattress, that sort of thing. And then he gets his signature bit of kit, which is an anti-magic talisman. And the luck power and the reincarnation is a fantastic example of world building paying off for PCs in a really fun way. And yes, they represent skills and power, and maybe they're unbalancing. I don't think they are, though. I don't think they break the game. I don't think they break the campaign of Wheel of Time at all. They give him really flavoursome abilities and really flavoursome powers, and he suddenly becomes, from the sort of why are you still here if you hate everything, to oh, you're actually really now important and vital part of this narrative. The lesson is, if you let PCs grow, and if you let them change, and if you don't worry so much about making them mathematically perfect, but just give them abilities that they will respond to, other PCs will respond to those abilities, players will love their PCs, players will love other people's PCs, and that if you just let things grow organically, and if you follow your instincts to what makes a more dramatic situation than what makes a mathematically fair game, you will probably create really memorable PCs that not only will other people at the table love, you will love to referee. Now, for all its flaws as an actual narrative, The Wheel of Time is really rich for what we can steal for our particular games, for our particular project of narrative gaming. all those dozens of kingdoms, often with rich traditions. That's where you get your classes from. There are these guys called the Weapon Masters. That's any strict martial fighters or any duelists, any kind of College of Swords style bards. There are knights and an organization of knights who run around being kind of fanatics and worshipping the light. So there's your paladins. There are barbarian tribes at the edge of the civilization. There are rangers who patrol the monster lands. There is a nation who don't use weapons, so that you've even got monks. There is a strong bardic tradition at court. So there's loads and loads of stuff that you can draw from to see, oh, that's okay. That's what character classes might look like in a world. That's what magic might look like in my particular game. Now, there was a 3rd E source book for Wheel of Time a long time ago. I couldn't tell you particularly how useful it is for a 5E game, but there are some ideas certainly on how you could do if you wanted to adapt this particular magical system to your world. Although if it was me, I would just have one caster class and I would divide all the spell lists into either elemental lists, earth, air, fire, and water, and everything else comes in under spirit. But I generally speaking don't think that you need to completely reimagine a magic system to get close to the feeling of Wheel of Time. So there you have it. That's a pretty long video on a book I do not particularly care for, but I think that's actually an interesting lesson here, is that you can draw inspiration from something that you don't necessarily feel an enormous connection to. I don't love these books. I think they have some cool stuff in them. That's about it. But I find them very, very useful as a source of inspiration for my gaming narratives, and that's all I need Wheel of Time to be. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Go read Wheel of Time if you like. No skin off my nose. This is Craylands. Why don't you give us a like and a share and a subscribe and all that kind of good stuff. Bye now.